Welcome to the City Current Radio Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We get to talk about inspiring stories, organizations, powering the good. Later on in the program, we're going to be talking about opera and working with animals. Those are two topics later on in the program. We're going to kick it off, though, talking about love in a big world. We're joined by their founder, Tamara Fyke. How are you doing, Tamara?
Doing well, Jeremy. How are you?
Doing well. So obviously we are in our homes, our home studio. So we want to make sure that everyone is safe and healthy. But obviously, when you talk about the work that you do with youth and educators and families, some pivots taking place, obviously, with everything going on. We'll talk about that. But for starters, give us a little bit of a kind of a history lesson for Love in a Big World.
Sure. So Love in a Big World provides social and emotional learning resources for kids, families, schools, and communities. And we were actually founded in 1996. So we've been around for 24 years. And at that point, we didn't have the term social emotional learning. We actually called it character education. So we've been doing work in and around the greater Nashville area and throughout the country since that time.
What's cool about you is you take music, you take art, you take skits, there's interactivity. So you really do dive in on a creative aspect, but also to a really cool educational aspect that's character building. And there's a lot of tenets that go with that. But describe the programmatic elements that go along with this.
So we provide a number of different things. For educators, we provide professional development because for them, they need to understand how to integrate social and emotional learning or character education with their academic areas. For students, we provide workshops and assembly programs. And then as a continuous effort, we offer curriculum that can be used for morning meeting or an advisory period. So and connecting all of that is media. So using videos and music, as you mentioned, so that there's an ongoing presence of Love in a Big World. What we talk about all the time is that culture is the what we do. So we want to give students and teachers the what that they can do. And now, even as we've pivoted, and we can talk more about that in a minute, families, the what they can do in order to impact the climate. And that's the how we feel. And we want to make sure that kids, educators, families, feel seen, known, valued, and loved.
Talk about on your end the 24 character traits that go along with this that are kind of the aspirational goals for the kids.
Yes. So we have 24 different character traits defined in kid-friendly language. We start with that idea of choice being the opportunity and power to choose, the reality that all of us have decisions that we make on a daily basis about what we think, how we behave, and how that impacts others. And then moving on to ideas like courage, standing up for what is right, facing our fears, honesty, thinking and acting truthfully, kindness, treating others the way we want to be treated, and many more. And those actually stand as behavior guidelines for us. Like, how do we want to treat ourselves? How do we want to treat others in this big world?
Share when you talk about, especially on the curriculum side, the idea that you've got to be very mindful of diversity and you've got to be mindful of inclusion and some different elements. So share when you're putting everything together, what are some of those things that are in the back of your mind to make sure that, you know, what you're putting forward really does articulate love in a big world?
Yes, good question. So we want to make sure that we are culturally relevant. And that means that we are providing a representation of all the different children and nationalities that we serve. Here in Nashville, we have, I think at last count, about 160 or so different nationalities represented just in our school district. And we're about the 34th largest school district in the country, the urban school district. So being here in the city of Nashville, I've been extremely mindful of that type of representation. So we have stories. Our lessons are centered around stories. And so we have stories from Latina culture, African American culture, Native American culture, Caucasian culture. I mean, like all these different cultures represented, Asian culture, so that kids, when they look at these stories, they can see themselves. And the 24 character traits are universal values. They're values that everyone can agree. Everybody says, yes, I I want my child to be responsible, or yes, I want my child to learn how to cooperate with others. And so that's a common meeting ground, and providing that literature and then those hands-on activities where everybody can say, oh yeah, this makes sense to me, or I can see myself in this, really helps.
How do you grade success? What are some of the metrics that you look at that you say, this is working and this is helping us tell our story?
That's a good question, and I'm going to answer that in a couple different ways, Jeremy. So, when working in schools and with districts, evaluation is a key part of what we do. And from that standpoint, we're looking at student attendance, behavioral referrals, climate data, things like that. And that's very academic data, right? On a more personal level, so that's more the quantitative side. On a qualitative side, what I'm looking at are the stories that I hear from school counselors, from parents, from the kids themselves, even looking at their artwork or journal entries that they submit to us and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about when it comes to Love in a Big World. And so when you put all of those pieces together, both the quantitative and the qualitative, you get a really good story about impact.
Yeah. Share, don't name any names or anything unless you just want to, but share one of your favorite stories when it comes to the growth and the ability to see this play out in the life of a child.
Sure. So I would say most recently, we've had a pivot because of the pandemic.
Yep.
And instead of providing in-school services, we have been providing online. So we've offered free resources of our curriculum materials that can be downloaded by educators and families. We've also been doing shows online that are available through Facebook currently, and then we're looking to migrate to other platforms as well. But we have, I'll tell you two stories. One is that there's a school counselor in Murray County, which is just outside of the Nashville area, and she was using Love in a Big World with her students. And when the pandemic hit and school was changing, she said, I want to continue this. My kids need Love in a Big World more than ever. She's serving at a school with an 85% free and reduced lunch rate. So, there's a lot of instability. The kids are facing a lot of trauma, and they need the positivity and the encouragement of Love in a Big World. And if you look at the research and the science behind it, Christina Bethel last year came out with some research from Johns Hopkins that says positive childhood experiences counteract trauma. So this counselor wanted to keep that going. So she has been taking it upon herself to download our episodes and then upload them into their school's learning management system, their LMS program on her own, so her kids can continually engage. And then we've got parents then who are able to see and interact with the content, and then they're submitting pictures and photos and journal entries through our Facebook page and saying, hey, this is what my child is thinking about this morning. There's another mom who's really gotten involved. We're doing some work in Clarksville, Montgomery County, which is just north of Nashville, near Fort Campbell, and lots of military families in that area. And she also has just gotten really involved with her boys. And so to see that learning take place side by side, educators with their kids, or moms and dads, grandparents, aunts, uncles with their kids, that's where the beauty of it is. Because when it all comes down, Jeremy, there's no magic program that's going to fix a child. It's really relationships that build resilience. And so that's what we want to foster with Love in a Big World. We just want to serve as that bridge to connect kids and the caring adults in their lives.
I love it. What you mentioned on your end, COVID-19, the coronavirus, and obviously the pandemic and the quarantine has created a lot of challenges, but yet opportunities to leverage technology, which is exactly what you were referring to. What has been something that you've learned in this process, or give me, kind of, I guess, dive in deeper in terms of what you're doing right now and how you're using that as an opportunity to still engage, like you mentioned.
Sure. So there's a few things that I'm really excited about. One is that we're doing Love in a Big World shows on Tuesdays and Thursdays and offering them through Facebook Live right now. And I'll explain kind of the rationale behind that in just a minute. But that's a place where families can engage with us. And we've got groups like the Boys and Girls Club, YMCAs, juvenile justice, like all sorts of different groups that are serving kids but don't know quite what to do, tuning in. And then, as I mentioned, some districts that are referring their kids and families to our site on Tuesdays and Thursdays for that programming. In addition, we've launched a new show called Music City Kids. And Music City Kids airs Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at this point. And it's a collection of friends of mine who are also educational content providers here in Nashville. And we are focused on health and wellness. And we have different segments centered on movement, science, health. We have musical guests from the best of musicians here in town, a By Kids for Kids segment, which features kids here from Music City, financial literacy, kid entrepreneurship. So just an overall look at kids' wellness, not just thinking about physical health, but thinking about their emotional, their financial well-being, in addition to their physical bodies.
You mentioned entrepreneurship, but you putting on your hat as the founder. What's been a lesson that you've learned going through this? And obviously just starting up an organization in general, but what's been something that you would pass along as a bit of advice for, just dealing with adversity and kind of launching in to solve a problem?
I would say be willing to pivot, because usually the path is not as straight as you imagine that it will be. So, about a month ago, it's been about a month now since we made that huge pivot to online. And that was really an ultimate goal that we had, which is why, as I mentioned before, I would explain a little bit more. We're using Facebook rather than another platform at the current moment, because our goal is to build an ed tech platform that engages kids and families. And so we want to be able to provide our content, but not provide it too broadly and hurt ourselves in the end, if that makes sense. Want to use it more for promotional purposes at this point. So I would say two things. One is have that long range vision in mind. What do you really see happening 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road? And then second, be willing to pivot along the way, because, and I don't know if you've seen this doodle that's shown up on LinkedIn quite a bit, Jeremy, but it says like the path to your goal, especially as business, is not straight like this. It's more like this,
right?
Back and forth,
all over the place.
And that's exactly what it is. I think I'll add a third piece of advice is find people that you can collaborate with. The strength of what we're doing now with Music City Kids is that there's a host of us who are collaborating together. And I think now more than ever, people are willing to cooperate, and that's essential. I mean, if you have the common goal in mind that we want to serve and promote healthy and happy kids, strong and healthy families, and you can find like-minded people to get that done, that's great. And lay aside the idea that there's a limited amount of money out there or a limited amount of opportunity, and so I've got to get mine. Instead, adapt to an abundance mindset. There's plenty for everyone. And when we have that vision of abundance, then we can make room at the table for everyone and be much more successful.
Perfect advice. I love it. So obviously financial contribution is really important for what you do. And obviously given the situation, very, very important. And maybe share one way that we can help. I think promotion of just what you're doing is a big part of that. So using our platforms, all of us, to be able to share and celebrate the good that you're doing. But what are some other ways we can help?
Yes, thank you for asking. Yes, that social promotion would be great. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. I get lots of interaction on LinkedIn. That would be great. Second would be that financial piece, as you mentioned, because at this point, we don't have our school contracts going. We're doing all the work that we're doing for free. And there are costs involved with that. Third would be some volunteers with some expertise, especially around grant writing or RFPs. That's kind of what I'm swimming in right now. And then I think a fourth component would be if you are a partner, a business partner that would like to get involved in some way, let's have a conversation about what that might look like.
Nice. Last question is the easiest is where do we go? So website, social media, where do we go to learn more?
Great. loveinaBigWorld.org. You can find us on all the socials at Love in a Big World, or you can find me, Tamara Fyke.
Well, Tamara, thank you for all you do. Greatly appreciate it. And thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. It was a pleasure to be with you.